A young mother, a nurse with dreams of healing others, thought she'd found stability in a man who promised her forever. A ring meant to symbolize love became her lifeline in a shallow grave. This is not just a story of survival, it's a testament to a mother's unbreakable will to live for her son. Tonight we bring you the haunting tale of Nixara Valmont, a woman who clawed her way back from death itself. He never wanted the marriage. The proposal was a performance, something to quiet suspicion, to keep up appearances. What he truly wanted was control of the narrative, of the future, of their child. So 2 weeks after putting a ring on her finger, he buried her alive. And when it was done, he cried, believed it was over, believed he had succeeded. But then something happened miraculously. She came back from the dead. How was that possible? Welcome to True Crime Seeker HQ. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe. Before the woods, before the box, before the betrayal that would change her life forever, there was just Nixara Valmont. Born on October 5, 1986, in Crest Haven, Oregon. Nixara was the youngest of 3 sisters, and the only child born after her parents divorced. Her mother, Sylvia Valmont, worked 2 jobs as a medical records clerk and part-time CNA. Her father, Roland Valmont, had moved to Idaho shortly after the divorce, and wasn't much more than a voice on the phone, if that. From the age of 5, Nixara watched her mother grind through double shifts and skip dinners so the girls could eat first. That survival mindset shaped her early. Nixara didn't have a silver spoon or a safety net, but she had grit. Even in elementary school, she was always the one who helped the teacher stay organized, the one who tutored younger kids during recess, the one who walked her sister's kids home when her siblings couldn't make it. Her teachers described her as quietly determined, never the loudest voice, but the one who stayed after class to ask how to do it better. By high school, she was known for 2 things, straight A's and a silence that carried weight. While other girls chased parties or homecoming courts, Nixara was volunteering at St. Agnes Hospice downtown, cleaning bedpans and learning how to fold sheets so tight they snapped. She said being around dying people reminded her to live right. She'd watch patients fade, then go home and write in her notebook about what they taught her. She graduated from Crest Haven High School in 2004 with honors, earning a full scholarship to Pacific West University to study nursing. College was the first time Nixara lived away from home. The adjustment wasn't easy. She didn't drink, didn't party. She worked 2 jobs, one at a bookstore, the other as an overnight receptionist at a student clinic. She often missed campus events just trying to keep the lights on. But she never complained. Her focus was relentless. Professors noticed. One even wrote in a letter of recommendation, Nixara doesn't ask for attention. She earns respect quietly, and if she says she's going to do something, she does it. In her 3rd year, something shifted. Nixara took a course in holistic medicine and began thinking beyond hospital walls. She dreamed of opening her own wellness clinic, somewhere people could get care without judgment, without wait lists, without bureaucracy. A place where single moms could come and just breathe. That dream became her compass. She graduated in 2008 with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and moved to Seattle for a residency at Harborview Medical Center. For the next 4 years, she worked rotating shifts in trauma, pediatrics, and maternal health. She saw the worst, but somehow she never lost her empathy. By 2012, she was back in Oregon, not because she wanted to be, but because her mother's health had declined. Sylvia had early signs of congestive heart failure, and Nixara stepped in to help. She found a small 2-bedroom apartment, picked up per diem nursing shifts at 2 clinics, and took care of her mom full-time. It was around this time that life began to wear on her, physically, emotionally, spiritually. She still had her goals, but she started pushing them off to next year. Then the year after that. In 2015, she met Zevran Thornvale. Zevran Thornvale was not the kind of man people remembered. That's how he liked it. He blended into rooms like furniture, always present, rarely noticed. Born on January 11, 1985, in Astoria, Oregon, Zevran was the only son of Malcolm and Evelyn Thornvale. His mother worked in school administration. His father, a former military supply sergeant turned church deacon, ran the household with rigid expectations. In the Thornvale home, silence was obedience, and respect was demanded before it was earned. By the time Zevran was 6, he knew the meaning of order. Chores were done before school. Shoes were lined up by color and purpose. Dinner had to be eaten in silence. No elbows on the table. No talking unless spoken to. Mistakes weren't corrected, they were punished. His mother, quiet and often nervous, enforced his father's rules without question. There were no family vacations, no birthday parties, and certainly no therapy. Zevran was taught that emotions were distractions and control was safety. In elementary school, teachers described him as bright but withdrawn. He didn't get in trouble, but he never connected. He didn't play tag. He didn't share crayons. He sat at the edge of everything and watched. Middle school offered little difference. He was always neat, punctual, quiet, a straight B student who never raised his hand, but always knew the answer when called on. If other kids teased him, he ignored it. He didn't fight. He didn't cry. He simply held it in, like his father taught him. By high school, Zevran had developed an obsession with routine. He ate the same thing every day. Tuna sandwich, no mayo. He wrote in a black notebook, daily logs of everything from what time he brushed his teeth, to how many steps it took him to get from the bus stop to his front door. One teacher called it impressive discipline. Another called it concerning. Zevran didn't date in high school. He didn't party. He didn't even attend prom. Instead, he graduated quietly and enrolled in a local trade school, studying logistics and inventory management. It was practical, predictable, and it didn't require talking to people unless necessary. His early 20s were marked by work and isolation. He landed a job at a regional distribution warehouse just outside of Salem. He started as a forklift operator but quickly rose to inventory supervisor. Zevran didn't make mistakes. He didn't take sick days. He kept spreadsheets cleaner than some men kept their kitchens. But his personal life was bare. No social media, no close friends, no exes anyone could recall. If he had feelings, they stayed behind his eyes. By 28, Zevran had settled into a lifestyle of rigid control. His days were scheduled down to the minute. He tracked expenses in color-coded folders. He wore the same 5 button-ups to work. He had a gym membership but never used it for fitness, only for routine. Same time, same treadmill, same playlist every time. It was also around this time that things began to crack. In 2014, his father died suddenly of a stroke. Zevran didn't cry, didn't speak at the funeral. He stood stiff next to the casket, hands folded, unmoved. But those around him noticed he became more obsessive afterward. He started tracking people, not just packages. Coworkers said he'd remember things no one else noticed, who left for lunch late, who missed a scan, who changed the break room coffee. It wasn't malicious at first, but it was unsettling. Then came the layoff. In 2015, after 8 years at the warehouse, Zevran was quietly let go during a round of departmental restructuring. He wasn't fired for misconduct. He wasn't reprimanded. But HR records later showed one note: rigid, isolated, uncoachable. He didn't protest, didn't plead, just packed up his locker and walked out. For the next 6 months, Zevran drifted. No steady job, no routine. He applied here and there but never followed up, and that lack of structure shook him. It was a crisp Saturday in November 2015, the kind of afternoon where the Oregon mist finally gives way to a clearer sky. Bayside Community College was hosting its annual community health fundraiser in the outdoor courtyard, a modest but meaningful event with folding tables, clipboards, and volunteers in scrubs, offering free screenings to neighborhood families. There were face-painting booths for kids, baskets of fruit on display, and soft gospel music playing from a portable speaker. Nothing fancy, just neighbors helping neighbors. Nixara Velmont had volunteered to staff the blood pressure table that afternoon. She had just come off a 12-hour overnight shift at the clinic, her feet still aching inside her sneakers, but she showed up anyway, hair tied back, blue scrubs neatly pressed, a stethoscope slung loosely around her neck. She wasn't there for attention. She rarely was. She liked events like these. No billing codes, no waiting rooms, no bureaucracy, just people, real people. Across the lot, Zevran Thornvale stood beneath a faded pop-up canopy beside a friend from his old logistics job. They hadn't seen each other in months, but his friend had invited him out of the house, said it would be good for him to be around folks again. Zevran didn't do well with crowds, but he'd shown up anyway, arms folded, eyes scanning. When his friend left early to beat the traffic, Zevran didn't follow. Instead, he stood back and watched her. Nixara was focused, gentle. She wasn't flashy like some of the other volunteers laughing loudly near the food tables. She wasn't flirty. She wasn't performative. She had this stillness to her, like the kind of person who didn't need to say much to be heard. Zevran noticed everything: how she placed the cuff with care on an elderly woman's arm, how she spoke slowly and clearly without sounding condescending, how she waited an extra 3 seconds before giving someone their reading, Just enough time to make it feel human, not clinical. He waited until the line died down. Then he stepped forward. "Is this the blood pressure thing?" he asked. Nixara glanced up. "It is," she smiled, gesturing toward the empty seat across from her. "You want to check yours?" Zevran nodded and sat. He extended his arms stiffly, uncertain, and asked, "So, what do the numbers even mean?" That question, simple, genuine, made her pause. Most people just took their reading and left. But he was curious. He wanted to know. She liked that. "Well," she said, wrapping the cuff around his arm, "the top number's your systolic. That's the pressure when your heart beats. The bottom's diastolic when it's at rest. 120/80 is considered healthy. Over 140, you should probably see a doctor." He nodded slowly. "So if mine's like 135/88, she cocked an eyebrow. "You're close. You could use some more sleep and maybe cut back on sodium." He cracked a faint smile. "You always this calm?" She looked at him, amused. "Comes with the job. Nurses don't get to panic." He didn't push the conversation further, just sat quietly while she noted the reading on her clipboard. Then, right before standing up, he said something she didn't expect. "You explain things well. You don't rush people." Nixara blinked, not flattered, just surprised. It wasn't the kind of compliment she was used to. It wasn't about her looks. It wasn't an angle. It was specific. "Noticed," she said. "Thank you." Then he asked if she'd be volunteering again next month. She wasn't sure. He said if she did, maybe he'd see her there. As he turned to walk away, he hesitated, looked back. "You said nurses don't panic," he said. "That true?" Nixara shrugged. "Even if we do, we don't show it." He nodded slowly. "Good to know." And that was it. No numbers exchanged, no flirting, just a strange, quiet moment in the middle of a community health fair between a woman who held everyone else together and a man who was slowly coming apart. 2 weeks later, he tracked down the event organizer and asked for the name of the volunteer at the blood pressure booth. Said he wanted to send a thank you card. Instead, he showed up to the next event with a new shirt and a folded slip of paper with his number on it. Nixara didn't call him right away, but when she finally did, he answered on the first ring. It started slow, just a few phone calls in the evenings. Nothing too deep, nothing too fast. Zevran would call Nixara at exactly 8 p.m. Nuftu never earlier, never later. At first she thought it was coincidence, but after the fifth call landed on the dot, she realized it was intentional. He liked structure. He liked timing. He liked to know what to expect. Their conversations were quiet but meaningful. He didn't talk much about his past, but he asked a lot about hers, about her work, her sisters, how she handled stress. She liked that he listened, really listened. When she mentioned in passing that she liked Earl Grey tea, he brought her a box 2 days later. When she told him her mother had a heart episode last winter, he started researching low-sodium diets and sent her articles, without saying a word about it. She thought it was thoughtful, considerate, the kind of quiet support most people never offer. He didn't crowd her. He didn't flood her phone with texts. He just showed up when he said he would, stayed present, and left her space. They met for dinner once a week, always low-key places. He said he didn't like restaurants where the music was loud. She didn't mind. She wasn't trying to be impressed. She was trying to feel safe. And with Zevran, at least in the beginning, she did. By early 2016, things had deepened. Nixara was spending most weekends at his one-bedroom apartment off Pineview Lane. It was modest, but spotless. Everything was labeled, folded, alphabetized. His closet had matching hangers. His spice rack was arranged by expiration date. She joked that it felt like a hotel. He said order helped him think. Sometimes she found it comforting, other times unnerving. He cooked for her, always the same 3 meals. He refused to let her touch the thermostat. He didn't like sudden changes in the TV volume or when she left kitchen cabinets open. But he never raised his voice, never got angry, just quietly corrected her. She started noticing how often he rearranged things after she used them, whether it was a mug she set on the counter or the way she left her keys on the table. He never complained, he just adjusted. Nixara brushed it off as habit, maybe a little quirky, maybe a little intense. But in a world where chaos was the norm, a man with structure didn't seem like the worst thing, especially after the relationships she'd endured before. Flaky men, men with big talk and no follow-through, men who disappeared when things got real. Zevran was always there, always available, always consistent. By the summer of 2016, with her lease ending and her mother's health improving slightly, Zevran asked if she'd consider moving in. He made the case with quiet logic. Why pay rent in 2 places when they spent nearly every night together? Why keep running back and forth with clothes, groceries, and toiletries? Niksara thought about it, talked to her sister, weighed her options. She wasn't in love yet, but she was tired. Tired of uncertainty. Tired of overextending. Tired of doing everything alone. Zevran wasn't flashy, but he was solid, and that felt like a kind of love she could grow into. So in September 2016, she packed up her one-bedroom unit on Willow Creek Road, donated half her furniture, and moved into Zevran's apartment full-time. He cleared a drawer for her, labeled it, bought her a new set of towels, white like his. Everything seemed to fall into place. She was 30, he was 31. They both had jobs, no games, no drama. And after years of chaos, Niksara convinced herself that this quiet life with matching towels and synchronized morning routines was what she'd been working toward. What she didn't see then was that Zevran didn't just invite her in to share space. He invited her in to monitor, manage, and eventually own. But at the time, to Niksara, it felt like a beginning. She didn't know she was already standing at the edge. By the spring of 2017, their quiet routine had evolved into something that looked like stability. Niksara was still working per diem shifts at 2 clinics, and Zevran had picked up steady hours managing inventory at a mid-sized distribution warehouse in Marion County. Their days were structured, their bills were paid, and for the first time in years, Niksara allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't feel like a scramble for survival. Then on April 14, 2017, everything changed. That was the day Calyx Thornvale was born. 6 pounds 11 ounces, with wide brown eyes and a soft cry that made Niksara's breath catch the first time she heard it. She hadn't planned on becoming a mother just yet. It wasn't part of the clinic dream or the travel nursing license she was still trying to finish. But the moment she held him in her arms, she knew this was hers. Her reason, her beginning. Zevran was there in the delivery room, silent, standing just behind the nurses, watching. He didn't cry, he didn't say much. He held Niksara's hand during the final push, then let go the moment the baby arrived. He stepped aside, let them clean Calyx, and took a photo from a distance. When a nurse asked if he wanted to cut the cord, he shook his head and said, "She can do it." And she did. Niksara would later say that those first few days with Calyx felt like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. Long nights with soft lullabies playing from her phone, nursing under a warm lamp, whispering to a child too new to understand. Her body was sore, her mind overwhelmed, but her heart felt full. Zevran, on the other hand, treated fatherhood like an assignment. He kept track of feeding times on a whiteboard. He monitored the diaper brand they used. He downloaded an app that alerted him whenever the baby cried, whether Niksara was already in the room or not. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't absent, but he was clinical, removed, more concerned with the routine than the bonding. Still, Niksara told herself that was just his way. Some men weren't naturally affectionate. He was trying, she thought. He was present. He bought formula without being asked. He changed diapers without complaint. He even sang off-key and monotone, but he sang when Niksara was too exhausted to move. In those early months, they took a few family photos. Niksara beaming, Calyx swaddled in her arms, and Zevran beside them, always slightly turned away from the camera. Not smiling, not frowning, just there. By summer, Niksara was back to part-time work, and Zevran's mother, Evelyn, began helping with childcare during the day. But Evelyn was strict, cold. She rarely smiled at the baby, and Niksara noticed the same tightness in her that lived in Zevran. No cooing, no softness, just feedings and folded blankets. Still, Niksara held it all together. She believed they were building something, a home, a family. She believed Calyx would grow up in a better environment than she had. That even if love wasn't loud in their home, it was stable, structured. But she didn't know that in Zevran's mind, Calyx wasn't just a child. He was an anchor, a tie, a fixed point, a reason to expect permanence. And when Niksara later mentioned wanting more for her life, wanting change, wanting out, Zevran wouldn't see that as ambition. He'd see it as betrayal. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. We see you, we appreciate you. And your support helps us bring stories like this to light. By 2019, Calyx Amaris Thornvale was 2 years old. Bright-eyed, energetic, always asking questions. He had Niksara's smile and Zevran's quiet stare. He loved toy trucks, bedtime stories, and pressing his forehead against his mother's cheek when he was tired. To Niksara, he was everything. Her anchor, her softness, the reason she still got up on the days she felt drained to the bone. But to Zevran, Calyx represented more than fatherhood. He was possession, proof, legacy, control. Calix had just turned 2 when Zevran proposed. It was the spring of 2019, and on the surface, everything looked like it was finally coming together. Steady jobs, a healthy child, and a man who, after years of calculated stillness, was suddenly ready to make it official. He knelt in front of her at a family cookout, holding out a ring with a small sapphire, the whole backyard frozen in anticipation. Niksara paused, not long enough for anyone to notice, but long enough to feel it. In that split second, her mind wasn't on flowers or dresses. It was on every moment she'd questioned her peace, every time she'd walked on eggshells, every time she'd silenced her own gut for the sake of keeping the home quiet. She didn't feel excited. She felt unsure. But in front of everyone, their son watching, cameras rolling, relatives clapping before she even answered. Niksara said yes, because part of her believed maybe the ring would fix it. Maybe commitment would calm the control. Maybe the title of fiancé would finally earn her the respect girlfriend never got. She thought saying yes would make everything easier, that love with structure might be better than love with freedom. She didn't say yes because she was sure. She said yes because she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of pretending, tired of hoping things would change on their own. And in that moment, with a toddler in her arms and pressure on all sides, saying yes felt like the simplest way to hold everything together before it all fell apart. The first week after Niksara Velmont held up her hand to applause and kissed the man who for 2 years shared her bed, her roof, and the son they made together. But by that Tuesday evening, she was no longer sleeping beside him. She'd moved into the guest room. She told friends it was because of Calix's sleep schedule, said it was temporary, but those close to her knew better. She had grown quiet, withdrawn. The joy that should have followed an engagement never arrived. Instead, there was tension, thick, heavy, ever-present. Zevran wasn't yelling. He wasn't begging. He wasn't doing anything loud. But everything about him had shifted. He watched her from across the room, from the kitchen doorway, from the top of the stairs. He'd stopped asking questions, but started memorizing patterns. She noticed her keys weren't in the same place she left them. Her phone battery would drain faster than usual. She couldn't prove it, but she felt it. Something was being tracked, controlled, measured. And she was done. In the quiet corners of her day, Niksara started planning her exit. She'd been offered a contract position in Boise, part-time but well-paying. A friend had an extra room for her in Caleb's. She was trying to move quietly, carefully. No confrontation, just distance. That plan died the night Zevran saw her laptop screen. She'd left it open for 2 minutes, just long enough for him to read the email confirming her U-Haul reservation for June 3rd. He didn't say a word, just closed the lid slowly and left the room. From that moment forward, the silence in the apartment felt colder, thicker, like walls closing in. She stopped replying to texts. Calls went unanswered. One friend sent a message that read, "Sis, are you good?" Niksara responded only once. "Just pray for me, that's all I need right now." No emoji, no follow-up. That was the last anyone heard from her. What they didn't know was that later that night, she made a quiet phone call to a moving company. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. She gave the address, requested a truck, asked if someone could come early in the morning before sunrise. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted to go. Zevran was in the hallway when she made the call, out of sight, listening. What came next wasn't about heartbreak. It wasn't about losing a partner. It was about losing control. And for a man like Zevran Thornvale, control wasn't just comfort, it was identity. Psychologists call it abandonment rage. The moment when someone conditioned to dominate, emotionally, logistically, psychologically, realizes they're being left. And instead of confronting loss, they decide to erase it. Not to argue, not to grieve, but to eliminate. He didn't just want her gone. He wanted her to not exist, so he wouldn't have to lose control. That night, while Niksara quietly packed a duffel bag and placed Calix's clothes neatly inside, Zevran was already drafting his plan, one step at a time. Because in his mind, if she left, she'd take the child. If she took the child, she'd take his legacy. And if he couldn't stop her from walking out the door, then the only solution left was to make sure she never reached it. May 7th, 2019. The kitchen smelled like lemon and rosemary. Niksara had just pulled the salmon from the oven, her usual go-to on busy nights. Calix had finally fallen asleep after battling a stubborn fever all afternoon. She was texting her cousin about a rental listing in Boise, asking about square footage, neighborhood safety, daycare reviews. The texts were quick, short, cautious. She was nervous but focused. She thought she had more time. At 8:03 p.m., Zevran walked in. No words, no expression. Just a glance at the counter, then her phone, then her face. He walked right back out. She didn't follow. She didn't ask questions. By that point, silence was common, expected. She stirred the rice one last time, reached for a plate and turned her back to the doorway. That's when it happened. A sharp, crackling sound, a sudden shock, pure voltage tearing through her spine. The taser hit her between the shoulder blades. Her knees buckled. The plate shattered against the tile. Her vision blurred. Her body hit the floor. She tried to move. She couldn't. Before she could scream, a towel was shoved into her mouth. Her wrists, yanked behind her, tightened by thick industrial zip ties. She thrashed once, twice, kicked wildly, but her body wouldn't respond. Her chest convulsed, the aftershock of the electricity making it impossible to breathe properly. Her brain screamed, her mouth couldn't. He said nothing. Zevran straddled her back, adjusted the ties, checked her pulse, then stood. Outside the building, an old surveillance microphone installed by a neighbor years earlier picked up what sounded like the faint thud of something hitting tile, followed by barely audible, muffled cries, like someone calling for help through a mouthful of cloth. But no one checked. No one came. Nixara thought she was going to die in her own kitchen, a space she had decorated with bright yellow dish towels and sticky notes with toddler drawings, the place she once called her peace. But she had no idea that this wasn't the end. This was just the start of what he believed would be the cleanest disappearance possible. No witnesses, no gunshots, no blood. Just silence, just distance, and a box waiting in the woods. Zevran Thornvale drove in silence. No music, no calls, no hesitation. His hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, like he was running an errand. In the back of the SUV, Nixara's body lay motionless, her wrists still bound, towel still in her mouth, eyes closed but flickering, conscious but paralyzed from the voltage that had just surged through her spine minutes earlier. The GPS route, one he had preloaded days before, took him off the main highway and onto a narrow two-lane road lined with rotted fence posts and overgrown brush. Duskwood Forest wasn't a place people visited. It had no signage, no trails, no campsites, just trees. Dozens of acres of tangled, unmonitored woods that hadn't seen foot traffic in years. He pulled off the road at a bend where no streetlights reached. Tires crunched over gravel. The flashlight on his phone cast a shaky glow as he opened the trunk. She didn't move. He didn't say her name. Instead, he dragged her out slowly, knees scraping the dirt, skin against branches, and carried her to a shallow trench, no more than 10 inches deep. Beside the trench sat a large refrigerator-sized cardboard box, folded earlier, pre-taped, pre-measured. He had prepared it. Zevran forced her inside. She didn't fight. She couldn't. The box creaked as her body settled into its bottom. Knees curled, arms folded under her side. Then came the weight. 3 rotting pine branches, thick as thighs, layered on top. Dirt next. Stones gathered from the surrounding brush. Roughly 88 pounds of pressure, enough to keep the box sealed, enough to keep it buried. No prayers, no final words. Just dirt, silence, and the sound of a flashlight flickering out. He didn't stay to watch. He didn't even look back. 10 minutes later, Zevran's phone pinged at a gas station 32 miles away. Security footage showed him buying a bottle of water and a pack of gum. Calm, face dry, shirt unstained. He paid in cash. He didn't speak. But back in Duskwood, beneath that layered dirt and decomposing branches, Nixara Velmont was still breathing, barely. Inside the box, her chest was constricted by the pressure of the debris, her nose filled with the scent of wet paper, rotting leaves, and her own sweat. The towel in her mouth was soaked, part blood, part saliva, part dirt. She couldn't scream. She could only listen to her own heart, to the suffocating quiet, to the nothing. But Nixara didn't panic. Not yet, not completely. Her nursing background taught her something most people wouldn't know in that moment. Shallow breaths, stay low, conserve air, think. The trauma to her spine still limited her movement. Her wrists, now raw from the zip ties, throbbed. Her knees cramped. Her jaw ached. And yet somewhere in that darkness, she realized one thing. She was still wearing the engagement ring. She couldn't move her legs, but she could cut. And so she did. She pressed the edge of the ring against the plastic, back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. The first layer only frayed. The second dug into her skin. But Nixara didn't stop. She bled through her fingertips, the sting forcing her focus. One breath, then another. Every time she came close to blacking out, she reminded herself, Calyx, her son, her only reason, her only thought. What do you think about when you're dying in a box your fiancé put you in? You think about your child's laugh. You think about the last time you held them, kissed their forehead. You think about promises that turned into traps. And you think about the silence, the kind that comes when someone who once loved you decides you don't get to exist anymore. The zip tie snapped. The sound was quiet, almost nothing. But to Nyxara, it was thunder. She brought her hands to her chest, wrists trembling, fingers barely responding. She adjusted her body inch by inch until her elbows could press against the inner walls. The box groaned, then bowed. She pushed again. Dirt fell. Leaves shifted. One of the branches rolled slightly. The weight above her chest didn't vanish, but it moved just enough for air to slip in. Just enough for her to breathe without gasping. Just enough for her to try. And she did. She clawed upward. Not fast, not with strength, but with everything left in her. Her nails shredded. Her arms screamed, but the box began to give. Moisture had softened the cardboard. Mud leaked through the seams. Her right hand burst through first, grabbing air like it was solid. Her second push broke the surface. A gasp, a scream that didn't even sound like her voice anymore. She rolled out of the trench, face down in wet soil, shivering, lungs burning, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. She had no idea where she was, no idea how far she'd come, but she knew one thing: she wasn't dead, not yet, and if she could stand, she could run. She stumbled through brush, thorns dragging across her legs, clothes ripped, blood soaking through her sleeves. Every step felt like walking on fire. She tripped 3 times, crawled twice, but she kept moving because there was no going back. The dashcam rolls quietly through the dark stretch of Route 27. Then a shape appears in the headlights. Small, slow-moving, unsteady. At first it looks like debris or an animal, but as the patrol car gets closer, the outline becomes clear. A barefoot woman covered in mud stumbles forward into the road, arms lifting weakly. She collapses face down before the tires reach her. Deputy Callahan hits the brakes. He jumps out. The radio crackles, his voice urgent and confused. "We've got a female. She's down, breathing shallow. Requesting EMS now." Minutes later, paramedics arrive and load her into the ambulance. Her body is cold to the touch. Her wrists are wrapped in torn flesh. Her breathing is faint and irregular. Her blood pressure reads 78/52. Internal temperature barely over 91. Hypothermia is setting in. Her vocal cords are bruised. Her throat is swollen shut. A towel had been shoved into her mouth for hours. She can't speak, but her eyes are open. She's alert. She's alive. In the trauma room at County General, doctors work fast. Her wrists are treated. Oxygen lines are inserted. She's intubated. Her body trembles beneath the thermal blankets. Officers arrive. They bring in a dry erase board, a marker. One simple question: who did this? She lifts the marker with trembling fingers and slowly writes 6 letters in block caps. ZEVRAN. When her breathing tube is removed, 3 hours later, she opens her mouth to speak. The first words she says aren't about pain or fear or justice. She says, "Tell my son I didn't leave him." Back at the apartment, Zevran Thornvale is found asleep on the couch. Television still playing, shoes still on. Calyx, 2 years old, is asleep in the crib in the next room. The knock at the door is answered slowly. Zevran opens it, yawning, calm, detached. When asked about Nyxara's whereabouts, he says they argued, says she stormed out around 9, maybe went to her sister's, maybe took her phone. He doesn't know for sure. But Nyxara's phone is found still charging on the kitchen counter. Her keys are in her purse. Her car is untouched, parked 2 blocks away. Officers walk through the apartment. Nothing broken, no signs of struggle, but the kitchen floor is wet. The smell of bleach is strong. The trash can is empty, but freshly scrubbed. In the laundry area, they find a ripped open package of industrial zip ties. One is half buried under the washing machine. Another is stretched and bloodied at the edge of a folded towel. When officers ask Zevran if he's concerned, he shrugs. No panic, no confusion, just one phrase repeated again and again. She left, but Nyxara never left. She had been taken, buried, and now she was alive to prove it. The evidence begins to fall into place faster than anyone expected. Investigators return to Zevran's vehicle and inspect the undercarriage. Packed between the tire treads and wheel well lining is thick, clump dirt, fresh, loose, and rich with the same mineral composition found in the upper ridge of Duskwood Forest. Soil samples confirm the match. In the trunk, 2 faint smears of dried blood, small, wiped, almost missed. Test positive for Nixara's DNA. Investigators pry open the spare tire compartment and find a single leaf embedded beneath the lining. That leaf, along with a broken branch fragment found inside the wheel bay, is unique to the exact area where Nixara was buried. The trash can inside the apartment, though recently scrubbed, still holds what looks like melted plastic residue clinging to the corners. Chemical analysis confirms it came from heavy-duty zip ties, the same brand and tensile strength used to bind Nixara's wrists. A small cardboard sliver is also recovered from the vacuum filter, thin, corrugated, and stained with traces of blood and tree sap. Its pattern and fiber composition are a direct match to the box she was found clawing her way out of. Zevran's phone pings are subpoenaed. The GPS data places him on Route 27, turning onto County Road 42, then heading off the grid for nearly 52 minutes before reappearing at a gas station 10 miles from the forest site. That time frame between 9:10 and 10 p.m. overlaps precisely with the estimated burial window determined by emergency physicians and forensic pathologists. Back at the station, detectives log his belongings into evidence. 1 crumpled receipt, 1 house key, and a small velvet ring box. The box is empty. Inside it, traces of oil and skin residue are collected. The outline of a ring, once cradled by the cushion, is visible under forensic light. That same ring's silver band sapphire center was still on Nixara's finger when she was pulled into the trauma bay. During his second police interview, held in a small interrogation room at the Marion County Sheriff's Office, Zevran Thornvale sits alone for nearly 18 minutes before detectives enter. The video footage shows him staring at the table, elbows on the edge, fingers interlocked tightly, still composed, unmoved. The first question out of the detective's mouth is simple. "Do you know why you're here?" He doesn't ask about Nixara. He doesn't ask if she's okay. He doesn't ask if she's alive. He says flatly, "I assume it's about the drama." When they tell him she was found alive, crawling out of a makeshift grave, covered in blood, with zip tie injuries and evidence leading directly back to him, his reaction doesn't shift. Not a flinch, not a blink. He simply exhales and says she always needed an audience. He claims they argued the night she disappeared, claims she accused him of being too controlling, said she made threats about taking Caleb's and never coming back, that she was unbalanced and often said things she didn't mean. He calls her emotional, says she had a pattern, that she was the type to make things bigger than they were. She always had to be the victim, he adds. When detectives confront him with GPS records, soil samples, and zip tie residue, he leans back slightly, then leans forward again. His voice remains calm. "You think I buried her in a forest because we had a fight?" They respond with silence. He goes on, "She's smart, she knows how to play people. She probably set it up. Wanted me to look crazy. You think it's that hard to plant a few zip ties?" The detective lays a photo on the table. Nixara, moments after being pulled from the roadside, her face barely recognizable, her body scraped, bleeding, and slumped in a paramedic's arms. Zevran glances at the image once, says nothing, doesn't reach for it, doesn't touch it. Then he shrugs, "Looks bad, but that doesn't mean I did it." The interview continues for over an hour. He never raises his voice. He never expresses concern for her or for Calix. He refers to Nixara only by her first name, never says "my fiancée," never says "the mother of my son." The most consistent thing about Zevran Thornvale in that room is his distance. Not once does he break eye contact with the table. Not once does he ask what she said about him. Not once does he ask what happens next. He simply waits, composed, cold. And when the detective finally ends the session, Zevran leans back in his chair, folds his hands again, and mutters under his breath. She always wanted control. Now she's got it. By sunrise, Child Protective Services arrive at the apartment. Calix, still in his pajamas, is quietly picked up by a caseworker while Zevran sits in a holding cell. No resistance, no questions, just silence. The boy's bag is packed by officers. 2 shirts, a pair of sneakers, and a photo of Nixara holding him at the hospital the day he was born. No one from Zevran's side of the family makes a call that night. Calix leaves without saying goodbye. May 21st, 2019. Zevran Thornvale was arrested in the parking lot of a downtown strip mall. He was wearing slacks, holding a takeout bag, and reaching for his car door when officers surrounded him. No resistance, no reaction. He simply placed the bag on the hood, turned, and allowed them to cuff his wrists. When they read him his charges, attempted murder, kidnapping, domestic assault, and child endangerment, he blinked once, and asked if they'd be impounding his vehicle. At his initial arraignment, he stood straight in an ill-fitting beige jumpsuit, jaw tight, eyes forward. No family appeared on his behalf. No one from his side of the courtroom showed up. His name echoed across the chamber as the judge listed the counts one by one. The prosecution requested a full denial of bail, citing clear evidence of premeditation and the threat of reoffense. The judge agreed. Zevran was remanded without bond. In pretrial proceedings, the defense made its first move, mental incompetence. They argued that Zevran suffered from a dissociative disorder, possibly stemming from untreated childhood trauma and undiagnosed psychosis. They claimed he had no clear memory of the night Niksara was buried, that he entered a fugue state, that his actions were not his own. They requested a full psychiatric evaluation before proceeding to trial. The court-approved psychiatrist spent 4 sessions with him over a 3-week period. Each visit was structured around timelines, behavioral patterns, and recorded interviews. What they found didn't suggest confusion. It suggested calculation. Zevran remembered dates, times. He recited sequences of events down to the minute. He recalled what shirt Niksara wore the day she told him she was moving out. He remembered what he cooked for dinner. He remembered the route he took to Duskwood, the turns, the stops, the depth of the trench. He didn't cry. He didn't hesitate. He remembered everything. The psychiatrist's final report was unambiguous. Zevran Thornvale was mentally competent, not impulsive, not unaware. His thought process was intact. His emotional state was detached but functional. He was fully capable of understanding his actions and the consequences. In response, the prosecution leaned in harder. They compiled physical evidence, pulled surveillance footage, brought in experts to explain trauma physiology. They laid out the timeline of events in 1-minute intervals, from the last time Niksara sent a text to the exact time her fingers broke the surface of the forest floor. In the discovery phase, detectives found a spiral-bound notebook in Zevran's closet. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't coded. Just clean pages, neatly dated, starting 4 months before the engagement. Pages contained phrases like custody leverage, exit strategy, and containment if provoked. On May 5th, 2 days before the attack, one entry read, "If she's serious about Boise, this needs to be resolved before the 10th, must be final." Another line 2 pages later, "No noise, no mess, get it done." In court, the prosecution used the notebook as the centerpiece of their case. They called it the blueprint. They said this wasn't rage. It was restraint turned mechanical. One expert said Zevran's calm wasn't a sign of disorder. It was focus. He didn't break down. He took notes. He planned to finish the job. August 17, 2019. The courtroom is silent as Niksara walks to the witness stand. The heels of her shoes click softly against the floor, but every other sound seems to vanish. The room isn't filled with emotion. It's filled with weight. Months of recovery, surgeries, flashbacks, therapy, a child still asking questions, a life rebuilt from dirt and darkness. She sits upright, steady, eyes forward. Her left wrist bears a faint scar, the line where the zip tie bit through skin and memory. Her right hand trembles once, then steadies. She's sworn in. She states her name, then she speaks. She doesn't cry. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't look at Zevran. She tells the court about the night of May 7th. She talks about cooking dinner, hearing the sound behind her, the sharp burst of pain, the towel forced into her mouth. She recounts the darkness of the box, the air thinning, the dirt pressing down against her chest. She describes how she could barely move, how her legs refused to work, how the only thing she had was a ring and a thought. She looks to the jury and says, "I wasn't fighting for life. I was fighting for Calyx." Not a dry eye sits in the front rows. Family, friends, caseworkers, all of them holding their breath. Her words are not dramatic. They're direct, precise, lived. She steps down without ever acknowledging the man who once promised her forever. When the jury returns after just under 4 hours of deliberation, no one speaks as the foreman stands. The verdict is read without delay. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, kidnapping, domestic assault, child endangerment. The judge nods solemnly, then reads the sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. There is no outburst, no shouting, no begging. Zevran turns his head slowly toward her, his expression blank, searching. Niksara does not flinch. She doesn't blink, doesn't shift in her seat. She sits with the same stillness he once used against her, but now it's hers. His stare means nothing now. The silence no longer controls her. As the bailiff cuffs his wrists and leads him out the side door, he looks back one final time, But the room has already moved on. She stands, she walks, she leaves, and she does so on her own terms. The courthouse doors open to a wall of cameras and flashing lights. Reporters line both sides of the steps, microphones extended, voices overlapping in a chaos of questions. Nixara shields her eyes from the glare, but doesn't hesitate. She walks down slowly, hand in hand with Caleb's, now 3 years old, dressed in a navy blue sweater and tan corduroy pants. He holds a juice box in one hand and clutches her fingers with the other, unaware of the frenzy around him. One reporter pushes through the crowd, microphone nearly touching her chin. "Do you think he'll try again if he gets out?" She stops. The crowd goes silent for the first time all day. She looks directly into the camera. Her voice is clear, no hesitation. "I didn't crawl out of my grave to live in fear." She doesn't flinch, she doesn't blink. The ring on her finger catches the afternoon sun, silver, scratched but intact. The same ring she used to cut her way free. She's never taken it off. Not for pity, not for sentiment, but because it reminds her of what she lived through and what she'll never allow again. Calix tugs at her hand. She looks down, smiles, then continues walking toward the sidewalk. The crowd parts. Some call her a hero. Others just watch in silence, unsure of how to process a woman who stood on the edge of death and came back with fire in her eyes. If you or someone you know is in a controlling or abusive relationship, help exists. Your life is not disposable, and your voice can bring you back from the dirt. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE. You are not alone. This could save a life. Share this story.